Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with heartbreak. Today, I'm sharing the tale of a woman who traveled across the country seeking love, only to find rejection. But fate had other plans, and what she discovered was worth far more than what she lost. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The brass bell of St. Mary's Church in Millbrook, Massachusetts, chimed 4 times as Emma Wilson knotted the final stitch on Mrs. Harrington's wedding veil. She held it up to the afternoon light streaming through her small workshop window, the delicate embroidery catching the sun like morning frost. 28 years old and surrounded by other women's wedding finery, that was Emma's life in a nutshell. Her fingers were nimble, her eye for detail unmatched, but her prospects for a husband in Millbrook had dwindled to nothing but pitying glances from former schoolmates, all married with children of their own. Emma wasn't blind to her reflection. The looking glass showed a woman with warm brown eyes and a smile that lit her entire face, but also curves that defied the fashionable silhouette. Pleasantly plump, her mother had always said, before consumption took her 3 winters past. Emma preferred abundant, like the gardens she tended behind her little rented cottage. In Millbrook, however, most eligible men seemed to prefer women who took up less space in the world. The mill town was dying anyway. The textile factory had laid off 1/3 of its workers, and each week another storefront on Main Street went dark. Emma's embroidery business was steady, but not enough to sustain her forever, not with the rising rent and dwindling customers. So when she spotted the advertisement in the back pages of The Homesteader's Companion, it seemed like divine intervention. Established Colorado businessman seeks bride of good character and domestic skill, must be willing to relocate to growing mountain community with promising future. Age 25-35 preferred. Correspondence and references required before arrangements. Finalized. Unlike the more desperate-sounding advertisements, this one didn't mention must be comely or slender form desired. Nathaniel Porter of Pine Ridge, Colorado sounded like a practical man seeking a practical arrangement. Emma touched the words, feeling possibility rise in her chest for the first time in years. Their letters spanned 3 months, each one building upon the last. Nathaniel owned a successful mining supply business in Pine Ridge, a town growing steadily with the silver boom. He described a 2-story home on a 1/4 acre, with room for gardens and perhaps children someday. He wrote of his desire for companionship, for a woman who could manage a household and perhaps help with the store's books. He mentioned wanting someone with steadiness of character and Christian values. Emma shared her skills with embroidery and millinery, her love of literature, her experience keeping her late parents' household after her mother fell ill. She described her garden, the preserves she put up each autumn, the bread she baked twice weekly. With each exchange, she felt herself growing closer to this man who seemed to value the very qualities Millbrook's bachelors overlooked. When Nathaniel proposed marriage by post, Emma read the letter by candlelight, tears blurring the careful penmanship. "I believe we could build a good life together," he'd written. "Pine Ridge is growing, and a woman of your industry and character would be well respected here. I offer stability, kindness, and my complete fidelity." It wasn't poetry, but poetry had never put food on the table or a roof overhead. It wasn't passion, but passion faded, as Emma had witnessed in many Millbrook marriages. This was something she understood, a partnership of equals, bringing complementary strengths to build something lasting. Emma sold her cottage and most of her possessions, keeping only her sewing kit, a trunk of clothes, her mother's Bible, and a small bag of treasured books. She packed a special gift for her fiancé, a waistcoat she'd embroidered with Colorado, Columbine flowers based on a botanical illustration from the library. Her hands had worked the blue-violet blooms, while her mind dreamed of mountain vistas and new beginnings. The journey west took 6 days by train. Emma watched the landscape transform outside her window, Massachusetts's familiar woods giving way to vast plains, then the sudden, breathtaking rise of mountains on the horizon. She wrote in her journal each evening, documenting her thoughts for the children she hoped to have someday. "The land here feels ancient and new all at once," she wrote, as the train climbed through the Colorado foothills. "Tomorrow, I meet the man who will be my husband. I wonder if his eyes match the steadiness of his letters. I wonder if my heart will recognize him instantly. Mostly, I wonder if he will see in person what he valued in my words." Pine Ridge appeared first as a cluster of wooden buildings nestled in a mountain valley, smoke rising from chimneys against the evergreen backdrop. The train whistle echoed against the mountainsides as they pulled into the station, a modest wooden platform with Pine Ridge painted in fading letters across its awning. Emma smoothed her traveling dress, navy blue wool to hide the dust of travel, with a lace collar she'd embroidered herself. She'd pinned her chestnut hair in a simple but elegant style and worn her best hat, adorned with a small silk rose. Her gloved hands trembled slightly as she gathered her handbag. She'd written to Nathaniel which day she would arrive, and he had promised to meet her train. The platform was busy with miners, drummers, and a few families greeting arriving relatives. Emma scanned the crowd for a man matching the description Nathaniel had given, tall, broad-shouldered, with light brown hair and a well-trimmed beard. She waited as passengers disembarked and the crowd dispersed. Her trunk sat beside her on the platform as minutes stretched into a quarter hour, then a half. "Miss Wilson!" Emma turned to see a thin man with spectacles holding a folded piece of paper. Not Nathaniel, but perhaps his employee. "Yes, I'm Emma Wilson. Chester Simmons, ma'am. I work at the Silver Bank. Mr. Porter asked me to deliver this and arrange for your trunk." He handed her the note, not quite meeting her eyes. Emma's fingers felt numb as she unfolded the paper. "Miss Wilson, I regret to inform you that our arrangement cannot proceed as planned. I find myself unable to fulfill the commitment we discussed. The Palace Hotel has a room reserved in your name for 3 nights, paid in advance. I wish you safe travels should you decide to return east. Respectfully, N. Porter." The words blurred as Emma stared at them. 3 days lodging, and not even the courtesy of a face-to-face explanation. "Is there a problem with my trunk, Mr. Simmons?" she managed to ask, her voice steadier than she felt. The banker shifted uncomfortably. "No, ma'am. I'm to have it taken to the Palace Hotel." "I see. And Mr. Porter is at the store, ma'am. He asked not to be disturbed today." Emma's cheeks burned with humiliation and confusion. "Of course. Then I suppose I'll make my way to the hotel." "It's just down the main street, ma'am. You can't miss it." Emma nodded, clutching her handbag and the crumpled note. "Thank you for your assistance." She walked down Pine Ridge's main thoroughfare with her head high, though her throat ached with unshed tears. The mountain town was just as Nathaniel had described it, a church spire rising above pine trees, a lively main street with businesses displaying their wares, the scent of sawdust and pine in the air. It should have felt like an arrival. Instead, it felt like exile. The Palace Hotel was the tallest building in town, 3 stories of painted clapboard with a wraparound porch. The desk clerk handed Emma a key without comment, though his eyes held curiosity as he glanced at her travel-worn appearance. Room 204 was clean but sparse, a brass bed, washstand, and small writing desk beneath a window overlooking the street. Emma closed the door, finally allowing her shoulders to slump as she sank onto the bed. She didn't cry. The shock was still too great, the disbelief too overwhelming. 3 days lodging, as if she could simply vanish after traveling 2,000 miles to marry a man who now refused to face her. Emma unpinned her hat and placed it carefully on the bedpost. Then she did what she had always done in times of uncertainty. She made a plan. First, she would rest. Then she would seek out Nathaniel Porter and demand an explanation face to face. She was not some fragile creature to be dismissed with a scribbled note. Morning brought clarity and determination. Emma dressed in her second-best dress, a forest green poplin with simple lines that complemented her figure without drawing undue attention to it. She arranged her hair neatly, pinned on a modest hat, and headed downstairs for breakfast. The hotel dining room was nearly empty at this early hour. Emma selected a small table near the window, ordering coffee and toast from a sleepy-eyed waitress. She had nearly finished her modest meal when a woman's voice interrupted her thoughts. "You must be the Easterner everyone's talking about." Emma looked up to see an elegantly dressed woman in her 40s, her blonde hair streaked with dignified silver, her blue eyes sharp with intelligence. "May I join you?" The woman continued without waiting for an answer to her first observation. She sat across from Emma, arranging her skirts with practiced precision. "I'm Martha Jenkins. I own the millinery shop down the street." She studied Emma openly. "You're younger than I expected." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma set down her coffee cup. "I'm afraid you have the advantage of me, Mrs. Jenkins." Martha's painted lips curved in amusement. "Everyone knows everyone's business in Pine Ridge, my dear, especially when it involves Nathaniel Porter and a mail-order bride who arrived yesterday, only to be installed at the palace rather than at his home." Heat rose in Emma's cheeks. "News travels quickly here. Like wildfire, but don't worry, I'm not here to gawk or gossip." Martha leaned forward slightly. "I'm here because I recognize the look of a woman who needs allies rather than charity." "And what look is that?" "Determination mixed with uncertainty. You're planning something, but you're not sure how things work here yet." Martha signaled the waitress for coffee. "Let me guess, you're going to confront Porter this morning." Emma's silence confirmed Martha's assumption. "I thought so. Before you do, you should know a few things." Martha accepted her coffee, adding a precise amount of sugar. "Nathaniel Porter fashions himself an important man in this town. His store supplies most of the mining operations. He's on the town council, the church board, and fancies himself quite the catch, despite being nearly 40 and married to his account books." "We corresponded for months," Emma said quietly. "He proposed marriage." Martha's expression softened. "Did he ever see a photograph of you?" The question hung in the air between them. Emma stared at her empty plate. "No, it wasn't requested." "Ah." The single syllable contained volumes of understanding. "Nathaniel Porter has very, specific ideas about the kind of wife who would enhance his standing in the community. I suspect he built a picture in his mind that didn't match reality when you stepped off that train." The humiliation Emma had held at bay came flooding back. "Because of my figure?" Martha nodded, not unkindly. "Pine Ridge is small, my dear. Isabel at the telegraph office mentioned Porter sent a wire to Denver 2 days ago, asking about return train tickets. The timing suggests he saw you from a distance when your train arrived, before you spotted him." Emma closed her eyes briefly, the scene reconstructing itself in her mind, passengers disembarking, herself scanning the crowd, the inexplicable delay before the banker's arrival with the note. Nathaniel had been there after all, had seen her, and had withdrawn without a word. "I see," Emma said, her voice barely audible. "What do you plan to do now?" Martha asked. "Return east?" The question crystallized something in Emma's chest. Pride, perhaps, or simply the stubborn resilience that had carried her through her parents' deaths and the struggles afterward. "No," she said, surprising herself with the firmness of her response. "At least not immediately. I've sold everything. I own to come here. I won't slink away in shame because one man found me. Unsuitable." Martha's eyes gleamed with approval. "Good. Now practical matters. What skills do you have?" "I'm an accomplished seamstress and embroiderer. I also do millinery work." Martha set down her coffee cup with a decisive click. "Well, now, isn't that providential? My assistant left last month to get married. I've been managing alone, but with the spring season upon us, I could use skilled hands. The position includes room and board. There's a small apartment above the shop. The pay isn't lavish, but it's fair." Emma studied the woman across from her, searching for pity and finding only practical assessment. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "I know what it's like to arrive in a new place with nothing but hope and find that hope dashed," Martha replied. 20 years ago, I stepped off a train in Denver with $2 to my name and a husband who disappeared with my trunk while I was buying a sandwich. I built a life anyway." She extended her hand across the table. "What do you say, Miss Wilson? Partners in millinery, at least until you decide your next move." Emma hesitated only briefly before shaking the offered hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. Martha, please, we'll start this afternoon, but first," her eyes took on a mischievous glint. "I believe you had an appointment with Nathaniel Porter." Emma's resolve, which had wavered under Martha's revelations, solidified once more. Yes, I did. Porter's mining supply occupied a prime location on Pine Ridge's Main Street, a large, two-story building with wide display windows showcasing tools, equipment, and dry goods. Emma paused outside, gathering her courage, then pushed open the a door setting a small bell jingling. The store was well organized, with high shelves stocked with everything from pickaxes to canned goods. A long counter ran along the back, behind which stood a man matching the description from Nathaniel's. Letters, tall, broad-shouldered, with light brown hair and a well-trimmed beard. He was tallying figures in a ledger but looked up at the sound of the bell. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed immediately by discomfort. He straightened, closing the ledger. "Miss Wilson, I wasn't expecting—" "Clearly not, Mr. Porter," Emma interrupted, approaching the counter with measured steps. "You made that abundantly clear with your note. I thought, however, that after several months of correspondence and a journey of 2,000 miles, I deserved the courtesy of a face-to-face explanation." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "I don't believe there's anything to discuss. My note expressed my position. Your note expressed nothing except your unwillingness to honor your commitment." Emma's hands were trembling, but she clasped them firmly before her. "I sold my home and belongings based on your proposal of marriage. I left everyone and everything I knew." Nathaniel glanced toward the door, clearly concerned about potential customers overhearing. "Miss Wilson, please lower your voice." "I'm not shouting, Mr. Porter. I'm asking for an explanation," he sighed, running a hand over his beard. "Very well. The fact is, upon your arrival, I realized we would not suit. I'm a prominent businessman in this community. My wife must... That is, I require someone who... Someone slender," Emma supplied, her voice steady despite the burning in her throat. "Someone decorative?" Color rose in Nathaniel's face. "Someone who presents a certain image. You misrepresented yourself in your letters. I described my character, my skills, my background, all truthfully. You never asked about my appearance." "It was implied," he insisted. "Most women understand what's expected." Emma felt a strange calm settling over her. This man, with his ledgers and his concern for appearances, suddenly seemed small in a way that had nothing to do with physical stature. I understood that you wanted a woman of good character, domestic skill, and Christian values. I understood that you offered stability, kindness, and fidelity in return. Emma placed her gloved hands on the counter, leaning forward slightly. One of us indeed misrepresented themselves, Mr. Porter, but it wasn't me. His mouth tightened into a thin line. I've provided you with lodging while you make arrangements to return east. That's more than generous considering the circumstances. Keep your generosity, Mr. Porter. I've accepted a position here in Pine Ridge. Surprise replaced his defensive posture. What? With whom? Mrs. Jenkins has hired me at her millinery shop. Emma straightened, adjusting her hat slightly. It seems my skills are valued here after all, even if my person is not. You can't seriously intend to stay, Nathaniel protested. People will talk. Yes, I imagine they will, Emma agreed. About a man who invites a woman across the country to be his wife, then rejects her without the courtesy of a conversation. About a woman who chooses to build a new life regardless. I wonder which of us will fare better in that particular conversation, Mr. Porter. Before he could respond, the bell above the door jingled again. A miner entered, covered in rock dust and carrying a broken pickaxe. Nathaniel's attention immediately shifted, his public persona sliding back into place. "We're finished here," Emma said quietly, turning to leave. "Good day, Mr. Porter." She walked out of the store with her head high, not looking back to see Nathaniel's expression. The mountain air felt crisp in her lungs as she took a deep breath, scanning the busy street before her. Pine Ridge bustled with activity. Miners, heading to and from the silver mines that dotted the surrounding mountains. Shop owners arranging displays. Women carrying parcels or children. This wasn't the arrival she had imagined, but perhaps it was the one she needed. Emma smoothed her gloves and began walking toward the millinery shop where Martha Jenkins waited, her future unfolding with each step like thread from a spool. Uncertain, in its final pattern, but firmly in her own hands at last. Martha's millinery occupied a charming storefront with a blue-painted door and windows displaying elegant hats on brass stands. Inside, the shop smelled of steam-shaped felt, silk ribbons and beeswax. Martha looked up from a customer she was assisting when Emma entered. "Ah, perfect timing," she called. "Would you be so kind as to help Mrs. Cooper select trimmings for her new spring bonnet? I need to check on an order in the back room." Emma recognized the strategic introduction for what it was. Martha was immediately establishing her as a skilled employee, not an object of pity or gossip. She smiled and stepped forward. "I'd be delighted. I'm Emma Wilson, newly arrived from Massachusetts." Mrs. Cooper, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, looked Emma over with frank curiosity. "From back east? How exciting. We don't get many newcomers with genuine millinery experience. My Lizzie needs a hat for Easter Sunday, something to catch young Thomas Bennett's eye at the church picnic." And just like that, Emma was drawn into the rhythm of a new life, measuring ribbon and discussing the merits of silk flowers versus feathers as trim. By closing time, she had assisted 4 customers, reorganized a drawer of hat pins, and begun sketching designs for the spring collection. Martha showed her to the apartment above the shop, 2 small rooms with a shared bathroom. At the end of the hall, the bedroom held a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small wardrobe. The sitting room doubled as a kitchenette, with a cast-iron stove, a table with 2 chairs, and a threadbare but clean sofa beneath the window. "It's not the 2-story home Porter promised," Martha said, lighting the lamps as dusk fell. "But it's yours for as long as you need it." Emma ran her hand along the windowsill, looking out at the mountain peaks, glowing with the last light of day. "It's perfect, thank you. Get some rest. Tomorrow we begin your introduction to Pine Ridge Society in earnest." Martha paused at the door. "And Emma, Porter may have deemed you unsuitable, but I assure you there are men in this town with better sense and better hearts." Emma smiled but shook her head. I didn't come west for a husband, it seems. I came to find a new beginning, and I believe I have. Later, unpacking her trunk in the small bedroom, Emma's fingers brushed against the carefully wrapped waistcoat she'd embroidered for Nathaniel. She unwrapped it, the blue-violet columbine flowers catching the lamplight. After a moment's consideration, she reached for her scissors and began carefully snipping the threads, salvaging the embroidered flowers from the ruined garment. These blooms would find their way onto hats and gowns for women who appreciated beauty in all its forms, including their own. In her journal that night, Emma wrote, Pine Ridge, Colorado. Day 1 of a life I never expected, but am determined to embrace. The mountains here reach toward heaven as if to remind us that there are higher things than the opinions of men who cannot see beyond the surface. Tomorrow I begin again. And as the first stars appeared above the jagged peaks outside her window, Emma Wilson closed her journal, blew out her lamp, and allowed herself at last to cry, not for the man who had rejected her or the future she'd lost, but for the girl from Millbrook who had been brave enough to journey west with nothing but hope in her heart. Those tears, like the spring snowmelt feeding mountain streams, would nourish whatever grew next. The following weeks unfolded, like fabric beneath Emma's skilled hands, each day another stitch in the pattern of her new life. Pine Ridge revealed itself gradually, a town built on silver dreams and mountain determination. The community consisted of circles within circles, the mining families who lived in simple cabins on the hillsides, the merchants who formed the town's backbone, the wealthy mine owners whose Victorian mansions crowned the eastern ridge, and the assortment of drifters, prospectors, and hopefuls drawn by silver's siren call. Word of Emma's situation had spread, of course. She felt curious glances when she walked to the general store for supplies or attended Sunday services at the white-clappered church. Some looks held pity, others judgment, but increasingly there was something else: respect. Martha Jenkins was well regarded in Pine Ridge, and her obvious approval of Emma carried weight. The millinery shop thrived under their combined talents. Emma's intricate embroidery and eye for balanced design brought new customers, including wives of mine managers who previously ordered their hats from Denver catalogs. Martha handled the business side with shrewd efficiency, teaching Emma the art of diplomatic salesmanship, how to suggest a more flattering style without offending, how to upsell trimmings without appearing mercenary. "You've doubled our ribbon sales this month," Martha remarked one evening as they tallied the day's receipts. "Those embroidered bands you've been creating are quite the sensation." Emma smiled, massaging her fingers after a long day of stitching. "The technique is simple, really. My mother taught me when I was 12. It's not just the technique," Martha countered, closing the ledger with a satisfied snap. "It's your eye for what suits each woman. You make them feel beautiful." She gave Emma an appraising look. "Speaking of beauty, it's time we addressed your wardrobe. You can't keep wearing those Eastern dresses forever." Emma glanced down at her skirt, a serviceable brown wool showing signs of wear at the hem. "These clothes are perfectly adequate. For Massachusetts, perhaps, for a businesswoman in Pine Ridge." Martha shook her head. "You're no longer a traveler passing through, Emma. You're establishing yourself here. Your appearance should reflect that." "I don't have the means for a new wardrobe," Emma reminded her. "What you have are skills." Martha gestured toward the bolt of rich teal wool that had arrived with yesterday's supply wagon. "That shade would complement your complexion beautifully, and with your embroidery talents." She tapped her lips thoughtfully. "A walking suit, I think. Something that speaks of competence and style rather than Eastern primness." Emma ran her fingers over the wool, imagining the possibilities. "It would be extravagant." "It would be an investment," Martha corrected. "The women of Pine Ridge pay attention to such things. Besides," she added with a mischievous smile, "I Wouldn't mind seeing Nathaniel Porter's face when you walk into Sunday services, looking like a fashion plate from Peterson's magazine. Despite herself, Emma laughed. The sting of Nathaniel's rejection had faded from a sharp pain to a dull bruise. Still tender when pressed, but no longer debilitating. "You're terrible." "I'm practical," Martha corrected. "And speaking of practical matters, we need supplies from Bennett's Hardware. The display stands need reinforcing before we mount the spring collection." Emma gathered her shawl. "I'll go tomorrow." "Go now," Martha urged. "Thomas stays open until 6 on Thursdays. Tell him to put it on our account." The mountain air carried the crisp scent of pine as Emma made her way down Main Street. April in the Rockies was capricious. Warm sunshine 1 hour, swirling snow the next. Today had delivered perfect spring weather, and Pine Ridge hummed with activity as miners changed shifts and shopkeepers swept their boardwalks. Bennett's Hardware occupied a sturdy brick building at the corner of Main and Silver Streets. Unlike Porter's Grand Emporium, Bennett's was utilitarian, its windows displaying practical tools rather than fancy merchandise. The sign above the Dugur was hand-painted but neat. Bennett's Hardware and Supply, EST 1882. A small bell announced Emma's arrival. The store smelled of sawdust, leather oil and coffee brewing somewhere in the back. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, laden with everything from nails to axe handles. A long wooden counter dominated the center, its surface scarred from years of use. No one appeared to greet her. Emma moved further into the shop, hearing male voices from a back room. After a moment's hesitation, she called out, "Hello, is anyone available?" The voices stopped. Footsteps approached, and a man emerged from the back room, wiping his hands on a cloth. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair threaded, with silver at the temples and a neatly trimmed beard. His rolled shirt sleeves revealed forearms corded with muscle, a shopkeeper who clearly used the tools he sold. "I apologize for the wait," he said, his voice a pleasant baritone. "How can I—" He stopped, looking at Emma with evident surprise. Emma had grown accustomed to being recognized. The rejected mail-order bride was something of a local curiosity. But this man's expression held no judgment, only genuine interest. "You must be Miss Wilson," he said, tucking the cloth into his belt. "Martha's new associate." Emma nodded. "And you're Mr. Bennett?" "Thomas Bennett, yes." He extended a hand, then hesitated, as if unsure whether the gesture was appropriate. Emma resolved the dilemma by offering her own hand, which he shook firmly. His palm was calloused, but warm. "What can I help you with today, Miss Wilson?" Emma explained about the display stands needing reinforcement. Thomas listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about weight distribution and height requirements. There was something refreshing about his practicality, his focus on the task rather than on her personal circumstances. "I believe I have exactly what you need," he said when she'd finished. He moved around the counter and led her to a section of the store where brackets and supports were organized by size. "These will provide the stability you're looking for, and while these," he indicated smaller brass fittings, "will give a more finished appearance." His selections were perfect. Emma smiled, genuinely pleased. "You understand exactly what we need, Mr. Bennett." "That's my job," he replied with a modest shrug, "but I appreciate the vote of confidence." He gathered the materials and moved back to the counter, where he began wrapping them in brown paper. "How are you finding Pine Ridge, Miss Wilson?" The question was asked casually, without the undercurrent of gossip hunting Emma had come to recognize. She considered her answer carefully. "It's beautiful country," she said finally. "Different from Massachusetts in every way, but there's something compelling about these mountains." Thomas nodded, his hands continuing their efficient work. "They grow on you. I came out originally just for a 2-year contract with the Silver King mine. That was 10 years ago." He glanced up, a slight smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "The mountains have a way of claiming people. Is that why you stayed? The mountains? Partly. He secured the package with twine, his movements precise. I also saw an opportunity. Pine Ridge needed a reliable hardware supplier, and I had experience from my father's store back in Pennsylvania. When Old Man Grimes wanted to sell this place, it seemed like providence. Emma nodded, understanding the appeal of seeing a clear path forward. It must be satisfying to build something that meets a genuine need. Thomas looked at her with new interest. Yes, exactly that. He hesitated, then added, I've heard about your work at the millinery. Martha says you've brought Eastern sophistication to our little mountain town. Heat rose in Emma's cheeks. Martha exaggerates. I'm simply applying techniques I learned in Massachusetts. Don't undervalue what you bring, Miss Wilson, Thomas said, sliding the package across the counter. New perspectives are valuable, especially in places like Pine Ridge, where it's easy to become isolated in our thinking. The sentiment was unexpected, thoughtful in a way that caught Emma off guard. She reached for the package, suddenly conscious of her worn gloves and plain appearance. Thank you, Mr. Bennett, for the supplies and the welcome. Thomas, please, he said. Mr. Bennett makes me feel like my father. His smile was warm, lighting his entire face. Emma, then, she replied, returning his smile. Martha said to put this on the shop's account. Of course. He made a note in a ledger. Will there be anything else today? Emma shook her head. This should be sufficient. Thank you for your help. Thomas accompanied her to the door, opening it with a courtesy that seemed natural rather than performative. Good evening, Emma. I hope to see you again soon. Something in his tone, sincere without presumption, stayed with Emma as she walked back to the millinery. There had been no trace of pity in his manner, no hint that he saw her as an object of gossip or scandal. He had treated her simply as a customer and a newcomer to his town, a refreshing change that left her feeling oddly buoyant. Martha looked up from her account books when Emma returned with the package. Did you get everything we need? Yes, Mr. Bennett. Thomas was very helpful. Emma unwrapped the supplies, keeping her tone casual. He seems to know his business well. Martha's lips curved in a knowing smile. Thomas Bennett knows many things well. He's one of the few men in this town with sense enough to see beyond the obvious. She picked up one of the brass fittings, examining it. His wife died in childbirth 6 years ago, along with the baby. He's never remarried, though not for lack of willing candidates. Emma concentrated on organizing the brackets by size. That's very sad. It was. For a time, we worried he might lose himself to grief, but Thomas has always been steady, reliable in the best sense of the word. Martha set down the fitting. He's also on the town council and serves as a volunteer firefighter. Reads extensively, sends money to his sister's family back east every month. Emma glanced up, amused despite herself. Is there anything about Mr. Bennett that the town doesn't know? Martha laughed. Precious little. That's Pine Ridge for you, but some things people don't see unless they're looking closely. She tapped one of the brackets meaningfully, like the way he extends credit to mining families when they're between paychecks, or how he keeps a box of peppermint sticks behind the counter for children who accompany their parents to the store. He seems kind, Emma acknowledged, unwilling to reveal how much this information pleased her. Now, about this teal wool. Were you serious about a new walking suit? Martha allowed the change of subject, but her eyes held a gleam of satisfaction that suggested she understood more than Emma wished to reveal. Over the next few weeks, Emma's life developed a rhythm. Mornings were spent receiving clients at the millinery, afternoons devoted to embroidery and design work, evenings to reading or writing in her journal. On Sundays, she attended services at the Pine Ridge Community Church, sitting beside Martha in a pew midway back. Nathaniel Porter occupied a front pew with the other town dignitaries, his rigid posture never turning to acknowledge her presence. Emma's teal walking suit, with its tasteful black embroidery and tailored silhouette, caused a sensation its first Sunday. Martha had been right. The rich color complemented Emma's complexion and brought out the amber highlights in her brown eyes. Several women approached after the service to inquire about commissioning similar work. "You've made quite the impression," a familiar voice observed as Emma gathered her hymnal to leave. She turned to find Thomas Bennett standing nearby, Sunday, hut in hunt. He wore a well-kept black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and straight posture. "Good morning, Thomas," Emma greeted him, conscious of Martha watching with barely concealed interest. "I hope you enjoyed the service." "Very much, Reverend. Winters is particularly eloquent on the subject of new beginnings." His gaze took in her walking suit with obvious appreciation, though there was nothing improper in his attention. "That color suits you remarkably well." "Thank you. I made it myself." Emma smoothed the skirt, proud of her handiwork. Massachusetts winters allow ample time for developing sewing skills. "Clearly." Thomas hesitated, then added, "Several of us take lunch at the Silver Dollar Cafe after services. Would you ladies care to join us today?" Martha stepped forward before Emma could respond. "What a lovely invitation. Unfortunately, I've promised to visit my niece this afternoon, but Emma is free, aren't you, dear?" Emma shot Martha a look that promised future reckoning. "I wouldn't want to intrude on an established gathering." "Not at all," Thomas assured her. "Just a few friends enjoying Mrs. Holloway's Sunday roast. Nothing formal. Put that way, refusal seemed unnecessary. Then I'd be delighted, thank you." The Silver Dollar Cafe occupied a cheerful corner building with windows overlooking the town square. Unlike the saloons that catered to miners and drifters, the cafe was respectable enough for the after-church crowd, serving hearty meals at reasonable prices. Emma entered on Thomas's arm, conscious of curious glances but bolstered by his steady presence. The few friends turned out to be Sheriff William Cooper and his wife, the same Mrs. Cooper who had been Emma's first customer, Dr. James Harrington, and his scholarly wife Rebecca, and Widow Sullivan, who ran the town's lending library. They welcomed Emma warmly, making space at the large round table and immediately drawing her into their conversation about the previous night's unusually vibrant display of northern lights. "I've never seen them so bright," Mrs. Cooper declared. "William woke me at midnight to come outside and see." "A good omen," Widow Sullivan pronounced. "My grandmother always said the lights dance when important changes are coming." Rebecca Harrington, a slender woman with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, leaned forward. "I prefer the scientific explanation. Solar particles interacting with Earth's magnetic field. Though I must admit, there's poetry in your grandmother's interpretation." Emma found herself charmed by the group's easy camaraderie and wide-ranging interests. Thomas sat beside her, occasionally guiding the conversation toward topics that included her or offering quiet explanations of local references. His thoughtfulness went beyond mere politeness, revealing a genuine desire to make her comfortable. The Sunday roast was everything Thomas had promised. Tender beef with root vegetables and fresh-baked rolls. Emma hadn't realized how much she missed the easy fellowship of shared meals until she found herself laughing at Sheriff Cooper's dry humor and offering her own observations about the differences between Eastern and Western customs. "You must find us terribly provincial after Massachusetts," Mrs. Harrington commented as they lingered over apple pie. Emma shook her head. "Not at all. Pine Ridge has a vitality my hometown had begun to lose. The textile mills are failing back east, and, with them, the communities built around them. Yet you left voluntarily," Sheriff Cooper observed, his tone neutral but his eyes shrewd. A momentary hush fell over the table. Emma felt rather than saw Thomas tense beside her. She met the sheriff's gaze steadily. Yes, for reasons that didn't unfold as anticipated. She kept her voice level, dignified. But I believe there are no mistakes in life's journey, only different paths than we initially envisioned. Widow Sullivan nodded approvingly. Well said, my dear, and Pine Ridge has gained an excellent milliner in the bargain. The conversation shifted naturally to other topics. When lunch concluded, Thomas walked Emma back toward the millinery shop, their pace unhurried in the pleasant spring afternoon. I apologize for Will's bluntness, he said as they crossed the town square. He means well, but subtlety isn't his strong suit. Emma smiled. No apology needed. I'd rather honest questions than whispers behind my back. Even so, Thomas guided her around a muddy patch in the road with a gentle hand at her elbow. Your situation can't have been easy. No, Emma acknowledged, but neither is life for most people in one way or another. We all carry disappointments. She glanced at him, thinking of the wife and child he had lost. Some far heavier than mine. Thomas was quiet for several steps. Martha told you about Sarah and the baby. It wasn't a question, but Emma nodded anyway. I hope you don't mind. No. His voice was soft but not pained. Time has smoothed the sharpest edges of that grief. I'm able to speak of Sarah now with gratitude for the years we had rather than bitterness for those we lost. He looked at her with quiet intensity. But it helps me understand something of what you might be feeling, the disorientation of finding yourself on an unexpected path. Emma felt a connection in that moment. Two people who had experienced life's capacity to upend careful plans. Yes, exactly that. Though my situation hardly compares, pain isn't a competition, Thomas interrupted gently. Your experience is valid on its own terms. They had reached the millinery shop. Emma turned to face him, struck by his perceptiveness. Thank you for lunch, Thomas, and for the company. It was my pleasure. His smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. Perhaps you'd consider joining us again next Sunday. Oh, I'd like that, Emma replied, surprised by her own eagerness at the prospect. He tipped his hat and departed with a final warm glance. Emma watched him go, his straight posture and steady gait reflecting the reliability Martha had described. She had arrived in Pine Ridge expecting to begin life as a wife. Instead, she was discovering herself as an independent woman, and perhaps, just perhaps, finding connections that would grow naturally rather than from necessity or convenience. Spring advanced into the mountains with determined optimism. Snow retreated up the slopes, replaced by carpets of wildflowers that transformed the hillsides into riots of color. Pine Ridge buzzed with activity as winter's isolation gave way to renewed commerce and social engagement. Emma's skills gained increasing recognition. Women who had previously viewed her with curiosity or pity now sought her expertise in updating bonnets or creating trimmings for their existing garments. The teal walking suit had been followed by a practical navy day dress and a rose-colored blouse, each showcasing her eye for subtle embellishment. If she noticed Nathaniel Porter's tight-lipped disapproval when they occasionally crossed paths, on Main Street, she gave no sign. Her focus remained on building her new life stitch by steady stitch. Sunday lunches with Thomas and his friends became a pleasant fixture in her routine. Sometimes the group was larger, sometimes smaller, but always welcoming. Emma found herself looking forward to these gatherings, particularly to Thomas's quiet attention and thoughtful observations. Their friendship developed gradually, built on small moments rather than grand gestures. Thomas began stopping by the millinery on Tuesday afternoons when business was slow, bringing new books he thought Emma might enjoy, or simply sharing town news over cups of tea Martha tactfully left them to enjoy alone. Emma found herself seeking reasons to visit the hardware store, discovering needs for picture hooks or special thread scissors that somehow required Thomas's personal assistance. "He's quite taken with you," Martha observed one evening as they closed the shop. "I haven't seen Thomas Bennett this animated since before Sarah died." Emma busied herself straightening a display of hat pins. "We're friends. He's been kind to a newcomer, nothing more." Martha snorted delicately. "My dear, Thomas walked all the way to Hayes's ranch yesterday to select the perfect rose bushes for your birthday. Friends indeed." Heat rose in Emma's cheeks. "How did he know it was my birthday? I've told no one." "He asked me weeks ago," Martha replied, her expression smug. "Said he wanted to mark the occasion appropriately. The man is smitten, Emma. The only question is whether you'll allow yourself to reciprocate." Emma turned away, unwilling to examine the warm flutter that had become familiar whenever Thomas entered her thoughts. "It's too soon. I came here with such different expectations." "Life rarely conforms to our expectations," Martha said, her voice gentler. "Sometimes it offers something better if we're brave enough to recognize it." The rose bushes arrived the following morning, two healthy plants with crimson buds just beginning to unfurl. Thomas delivered them personally, his expression both hopeful and uncertain as Emma unwrapped the burlap from their roots. "Martha mentioned you had a rose garden in Massachusetts," he explained. "I thought perhaps you might want to start a new one here. These varieties do well at our elevation." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Emma deeply. Not jewelry or trinkets, but living plants that acknowledged her past while suggesting a future with roots in Pine Ridge. "They're perfect," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "Thank you, Thomas." He helped her plant them behind the millinery shop, their hands working together in the mountain soil. When the final rose was settled in its new home, Thomas reached out to brush a smudge of dirt from Emma's cheek, his touch gentle and warm. "Happy birthday, Emma," he said softly. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of feelings that had been growing quietly beneath the surface of their friendship. Emma saw the question in Thomas's eyes, felt the tentative hope in his touch. Not yet ready to answer, but no longer afraid of the question itself, she placed her hand over his for a brief, meaningful moment. "Thank you for making this birthday happier than I expected it to be," she said. His smile, tender and patient, stayed with her long after he had gone, like the lingering scent of roses in the mountain air. May brought Pine Ridge's annual Founders Day celebration, a festive occasion that drew people from surrounding mining camps and ranches for a day of food, music, and community pride. Main Street was decorated with bunting, and the town square transformed into a fairground with booths selling everything from quilts to rock candy. Martha and Emma had been preparing for weeks, creating special occasion hats and decorative items for the millinery's booth. The night before the celebration, they stayed late at the shop, arranging their wares in anticipation of brisk sales. "Don't forget, you promised to help judge the pie contest tomorrow," Martha reminded Emma as they worked. "It's quite the honor for a relative newcomer." Emma laughed. "An honor with considerable pressure. I've heard Mrs. Davidson has won 3 years running and considers it her birthright." "Precisely why new blood on the judging committee is welcome," Martha replied. "Besides, it will place you firmly in Pine Ridge society. Nothing says one of us like helping decide whose huckleberry pie reigns supreme." A sudden gust of wind rattled the shop's front window. Both women looked up as thunder rumbled in the distance. "That doesn't sound promising for tomorrow's festivities," Emma observed. Martha moved to the window, frowning at the darkening sky. "Spring storms in the mountains can be fierce but quick. With luck, it will blow through overnight." But luck was not with Pine Ridge. The storm that descended from the peaks brought driving rain that turned the dirt streets to mud rivers and sent makeshift booths tumbling. By midnight, A more serious threat emerged as Silver Creek, swollen with runoff from the higher elevations, began to rise toward the lower part of town where miners' families lived in simple cabins. Emma was awakened by shouts and the frantic ringing of the church bell, Pine Ridge's emergency signal. Throwing a shawl over her nightdress, she hurried to the window in time to see men running toward the creek, Sheriff Cooper's voice rising above the storm as he directed efforts to evacuate the threatened homes. A heavy knock at her door revealed Martha, fully dressed with a lantern in hand. The creek's flooding. They're bringing families to the church hall. Every pair of hands is needed. Emma dressed quickly in her oldest skirt and sturdiest boots. By the time they reached the church, rain-soaked families were already arriving, mothers clutching frightened children, fathers returning from sandbagging efforts to check on their loved ones. Reverend Winters and his wife were organizing blankets and hot coffee, their calm efficiency bringing order to the chaos. Emma found herself assigned to a corner of the hall where children were being settled on makeshift pallets. Many were wet, cold, and terrified by the night's events. Drawing on instincts she hadn't known she possessed, Emma began gathering the smallest ones around her. "Who would like to hear a story?" she asked, her voice deliberately bright to counter the storm's growling. "I know some wonderful tales about brave children and magical gardens." Slowly, tear-streaked faces turned toward her. A small girl with tangled blonde hair crawled into Emma's lap without invitation, thumb firmly in mouth. Others edged closer, seeking comfort in the promise of distraction. Emma launched into a story about a hidden garden where flowers spoke in whispers and friendly animals helped lost children find their way home. Her voice rose and fell with the narrative, creating pictures with words that drew the children away from their immediate fears. When one story ended, she began another, then another, until small eyelids began to droop despite the continuing commotion around them. She was in the middle of a tale about a clever squirrel when a new group of men entered the hall, soaked to the skin and mud-splattered. Among them was Thomas, his clothes dripping and his face etched with exhaustion. His gaze swept the crowded room until it found Emma, surrounded by drowsing children. Something in his expression shifted, softened. He spoke briefly with Sheriff Cooper, then made his way toward Emma, careful not to disturb the sleeping children clustered around her. "You're a natural," he said quietly, crouching beside her. "They look peaceful, despite everything." Emma smiled, gently stroking the hair of the little girl who had fallen asleep in her lap. "Stories help. They always have, even for grown-ups." Thomas nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. "The worst is past. The creek's crested and the sandbags are holding. No homes lost, though several will need repairs." "Thank God," Emma said fervently. "Were you at the creek all this time?" He nodded, pushing wet hair back from his forehead. "Every able man in town. Some of the mines sent crews with equipment. Pine Ridge pulls together in a crisis." "So I see." Emma gestured to the hall, where neighbors were sharing blankets and comfort regardless of social standing. Even Nathaniel Porter was there, his usual dignity forgotten as he served coffee in his shirt sleeves. Thomas followed her gaze. People show their true character in moments like these. He reached out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind Emma's ear, his touch gentle despite his rough hands. "You've shown yours." The simple statement, delivered with quiet certainty, warmed Emma more thoroughly than any blanket could have. Before she could respond, a woman approached to claim the sleeping child in Emma's lap. "You're Miss Wilson from the hat shop, aren't you?" she asked, gathering her daughter. "Millie hasn't gone to a stranger like that since her pa died in the mine collapse last winter. You must have a special touch." "She's a sweet child," Emma replied, helping settle the little girl against her mother's shoulder. "Brave too, they all are." The woman smiled tiredly. "That's mountain life for you. Teaches resilience early." She hesitated, then added, I can't afford fancy hats, but if you ever need mending done, I take in sewing. I'll remember that, Emma promised, touched by the offer. And please bring Millie by the shop sometime. I have scraps of ribbon she might enjoy for her dolls. Margin after the woman left, Thomas helped Emma to her feet, both of them stiff from sitting on the hard floor. You've made a friend there, he observed. Alice Jenkins is well respected among the mining families despite her circumstances. I liked her, Emma said simply, and her daughter. She gazed around at the hall, where exhausted families were settling for what remained of the night. Will you stay to help? Thomas nodded. Until morning at least. You should rest if you can. There will be much to do when daylight comes. But Emma shook her head. I'll stay too. As you said, Pine Ridge pulls together in a crisis. His smile held a warmth that had nothing to do with pride in his town, and everything to do with the woman standing before him, her hair escaping its pins and her plain work dress rumpled from children's clutching hands. You belong here, he said softly. I think perhaps you always did. In that moment, surrounded by the evidence of nature's power and human resilience, Emma felt the truth of his words settle into her bones. She had come to Pine Ridge seeking a husband and security. What she had found instead was a community, purpose, and a man who saw her clearly, not as an ornament or a convenient arrangement, but as a woman of substance and worth. Yes, she agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. I believe I do. The aftermath of the flood brought Pine Ridge together in ways Emma hadn't anticipated. Daybreak revealed muddy streets and water damage to buildings along the creek, but no catastrophic losses. Citizens organized themselves into work crews without fanfare or confusion, each person finding their place in the recovery efforts naturally, as if following an unwritten but universally understood protocol. Emma discovered her own role within this communal response. The millinery shop, situated on higher ground, had escaped damage and quickly transformed into an impromptu distribution center for dry clothing. Women from across town brought what they could spare, and Emma's sewing skills proved invaluable as she altered garments to fit their new owners. Her quick fingers tacked up hems, took in waistbands, and reinforced seams, while Martha recorded who had donated what and who had received assistance. You've got a knack for this, Martha observed, as Emma expertly modified a wool skirt for Alice Jenkins, the miner's widow. Organization in chaos. Emma smiled, pins held between her lips as she marked a new hemline. My father always said adversity reveals character. I'm simply doing what needs to be done. That's precisely my point, Martha replied, making another notation in her ledger. Not everyone sees what needs doing without being told. The bell above the shop door jingled as Thomas entered, carrying a crate of nails for the repairs being undertaken throughout town. His eyes found Emma immediately, a smile breaking through his evident exhaustion. Ladies, he greeted them, setting down his burden. The church committee asked me to bring these by. Apparently, you've become headquarters for matching people with what they need. Martha huffed with mock indignation. If by apparently you mean I've been keeping the only complete record of who needs what in this town, then yes, Thomas laughed, the sound warming the busy shop. Nobody doubts your organizational supremacy, Martha. His gaze shifted back to Emma, who was helping Alice try on the altered skirt. You've been at this since dawn, haven't you? Have you eaten? Emma realized with surprise that the sun was already high overhead. Time had slipped away amid the steady work of the morning. I hadn't thought about it, she admitted. I suspected as much. Thomas produced a cloth-wrapped bundle from his coat pocket. Mrs. Holloway at the cafe asked me to bring this to you. She says even Florence Nightingale needed sustenance. The comparison made Emma laugh, though she accepted the bundle gratefully. Inside were 2 thick slices of bread wrapped around. Roast beef and mustard. Simple, but exactly what her empty stomach craved. Please thank her for me. This is perfect. You can thank her yourself when you've rested, Thomas said firmly. You won't help anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. There was genuine concern beneath his teasing tone, a protectiveness that stirred something warm in Emma's chest. I'll stop for a proper break soon, she promised, after I finish Mrs. Jenkins's alterations. Thomas nodded, apparently satisfied with this compromise. Good, because I'm planning to escort you to dinner this evening, and I'd prefer you conscious for the occasion. Martha made no attempt to hide her delighted smile as she busied herself with her ledger. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks, but maintained her composure. That's very kind, but surely you have more important matters to attend to. More urgent, perhaps, Thomas conceded, but few more important. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then turned to address the room at large. The creaks fully receded now. Reverend Winters says everyone can return home by sundown, though some repairs will take days to complete. This announcement brought sighs of relief from the women gathered in the shop. Thomas fielded questions about specific properties with patient thoroughness before taking his leave, promising to return for Emma at 6 o'clock. Well, Martha said after he'd gone, her voice dripping with satisfaction. That was decidedly not the behavior of just a friend. Emma concentrated on securing the waistband of Alice's skirt, not trusting herself to respond without revealing the flutter of anticipation Thomas's invitation had sparked. Alice, however, had no such reservations. Mr. Bennet's sweet on. You, Miss Wilson, she said matter-of-factly. First time he's shown interest in any woman since he lost his Sarah. Town's been watching and wondering when he'd make his intentions clear. Duh, we're friends, Emma protested weakly, though the words felt increasingly inadequate to describe what was developing between them. He's simply been kind to a newcomer. Alice exchanged a knowing look with Martha. If you say so, Miss Wilson, but kindness doesn't usually put that particular light in a man's eyes. She smoothed the newly altered skirt with work-roughened hands. Not that it's any of my business, but Mr. Bennet's a good man. Helped me repair my roof last autumn without taking a penny, then found Billy a job sweeping up at the store when the mine wouldn't take him on account of his age. Emma found herself curious, despite her embarrassment. Billy is your son? Eldest of my 3, 14 now and determined to be a man since his pa died. Alice's voice held pride mixed with worry. Mr. Bennet's teaching him the hardware business, says Billy has a good head for numbers. This glimpse of Thomas's quiet generosity deepened Emma's already growing admiration. He hadn't mentioned taking the boy under his wing, hadn't used his kindness to enhance his own reputation. It was simply who he was, a man who saw needs and responded to them without fanfare or expectation of recognition. The afternoon continued in a blur of activity. Emma altered 7 more garments, distributed fabric for home repairs, and helped compile a list of families needing additional assistance. By the time Martha insisted she go upstairs to freshen up before Thomas's arrival, Emma was bone-weary, but filled with a sense of purpose and connection to Pine Ridge that felt new and significant. In her small apartment, Emma washed away the day's grime and changed into a simple evening dress of deep burgundy wool with black piping, one of her recent creations. Her hair, which had escaped its pins entirely during the busy day, was re-braided and coiled neatly at the nape of her neck. She was just securing the final hairpin when a knock at the shop's door announced Thomas's arrival. He stood on the threshold, looking markedly different from the mud-splattered man who had delivered nails that morning. His clothes, while not fancy, were clean and well-pressed. Dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a charcoal vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. His dark hair, still damp from washing, was neatly combed and he'd trimmed his beard. In his hand was a small bunch of wildflowers tied with twine. "Good evening," he said, his voice warm as he took in her appearance. "You look lovely." Emma accepted the flowers with a smile, trying to ignore Martha's poorly concealed delight as she busied herself at a nearby shelf. "Thank you. These are beautiful." "Wild columbine from the hillside behind my house," Thomas explained. "They always bloom after heavy rain, as if the storm gives them courage to open." The poetic observation surprised her. Thomas was practical and direct by nature, not given to flowery speech. That he would notice such a detail and share it with her felt like a privileged glimpse into the more private aspects of his character. "I'll put these in water for you," Martha offered, taking the flowers with a knowing smile. "You two run along. I'm sure you're both famished after today's efforts." Thomas offered his arm, and Emma placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, acutely aware of his solid presence beside her as they stepped into the evening air. Pine Ridge was settling into a tentative normalcy after the flood's disruption. Shopkeepers swept mud from boardwalks. Children played in puddles despite maternal admonishments, and the smell of cooking suppers wafted from open windows. "I thought we'd try Hamilton's," Thomas said as they walked. "It's a bit quieter than the Silver Dollar, and James Hamilton makes an excellent venison stew on Thursdays." Emma had passed the small restaurant at the edge of town, but never entered. Its lace curtains and polished windows suggested a level of refinement above the cafe's practical comfort. "That sounds perfect. I haven't had venison since leaving Massachusetts." Thomas smiled. Mountain venison has its own character, bold but sweet, like the landscape itself. Hamilton's interior was warm and inviting, with oil lamps casting a golden glow over white tablecloths and simple but elegant table settings. James Hamilton himself greeted them at the door, his French accent still pronounced despite decades in America. "Mr. Bennett, Miss Wilson, a pleasure to welcome you both." He led them to a corner table set slightly apart from the others, its positioning offering a measure of privacy without impropriety. "Our venison stew is exceptional tonight. We also have rainbow trout, fresh from the creek this morning." Thomas glanced at Emma. "What would you prefer?" "The stew sounds wonderful," she replied, touched by his deference to her preference. "And perhaps some of your sourdough bread, Mr. Hamilton? I've heard it's the best in the territory." The restaurateur beamed with obvious pride. "Mademoiselle has excellent taste. My grandmother's starter brought all the way from Paris 50 years ago. I feed it like a beloved pet." After he departed to fetch their meal, a comfortable silence settled between Emma and Thomas. The events of the past 24 hours seemed to have shifted something fundamental in their relationship, accelerating a connection that had been developing gradually over weeks. "You were remarkable today," Thomas said finally, his voice low and sincere. "The way you organized the clothing distribution, how you comforted those children at the church. You've become essential to Pine Ridge in just a few months." Emma felt warmth rise in her cheeks at his praise. "I only did what anyone would do." "No," Thomas shook his head gently. "Not anyone. You saw needs and met them with grace and practicality. It's a rare combination." The arrival of their meal provided a welcome moment to collect her thoughts. The stew was indeed exceptional. Rich broth with tender venison, wild mushrooms, and root vegetables, accompanied by slices of tangy sourdough bread still warm from the oven. They ate with the healthy appetite of people who had worked hard all day. The excellent food and relaxed atmosphere gradually easing the tension from tired muscles. As they finished their meal, Thomas poured Emma a second cup of coffee, his expression growing more serious. "There's something I'd like to discuss with you, if you're willing." Emma felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with nervousness. "Of course." Thomas set down the coffee pot carefully. "You know I lost my wife and child 6 years ago." "Yes," Emma said softly. "I'm so sorry for your loss." Thank you." His eyes held shadows of old pain, but not the raw grief that might have been expected from a more recent wound. For a long time afterward, I believed that chapter of my life was permanently closed, that Sarah would be my only love, that family was something other men enjoyed, but not me. He paused, collecting his thoughts. Emma waited, sensing the importance of whatever he was trying to express. "The hardware store became my life," Thomas continued. "I found purpose in serving the community, in building a business that met genuine needs. It was enough, or so I told myself." His gaze met hers directly. "And then you arrived in Pine Ridge." Emma's heart quickened at the quiet intensity in his voice. "Not in the way anyone expected," he acknowledged with a small smile, "but in exactly the way I now believe that was meant to be." "Thomas," he held up a hand gently, "please let me finish. I've rehearsed this poorly enough as it is." Taking a deep breath, he continued, "I'm not a poetic man, Emma. I deal in practical matters, nails and lumber and tools, but I know quality when I see it, and strength and beauty that goes beyond the surface." His hand moved across the table to cover hers, warm and slightly calloused from years of honest work. "I find myself thinking of you throughout each day, wondering what you'd think of a new book I'm reading, or if you'd enjoy the sunset view from Overlook Ridge. Wanting to share both ordinary moments and special ones with you." Emma felt tears prickling behind her eyes at the simple honesty of his declaration. There was no flowery language, no grand gestures, just the authentic expression of a good man's heart. "What I'm trying to say, very inadequately," Thomas concluded, "is that I care for you deeply, Emma, more than I believed possible again in this lifetime, and I would be honored if you would consider allowing me to court you properly." The traditional phrasing brought a smile to Emma's lips even as a tear escaped down her cheek. In a time when relationships often began and ended casually, especially in frontier towns, Thomas was offering her the respect of formal courtship, a public declaration of his serious intentions. "You needn't answer immediately," he added quickly, misinterpreting her emotion as hesitation. "I understand your circumstances upon arriving in Pine Ridge were complicated. Perhaps it's too soon." "No," Emma interrupted, turning her hand beneath his to interlace their fingers. "It's not too soon, not at all." Hope brightened his expression. "Then you'll consider—" "I don't need to consider," she said softly. "My answer is yes, Thomas. I would be honored by your courtship." The smile that transformed his face then was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual at first, then radiant. He lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, the gesture old-fashioned and deeply touching. "You've made me very happy," he said simply. They lingered over coffee as twilight deepened outside the restaurant's windows, their conversation flowing easily from serious topics to lighter ones. Thomas spoke of his plans to expand the hardware store to include agricultural supplies for the small farms developing in the valley. Emma shared her ideas for the millinery's autumn collection, inspired by the rich colors of the Colorado landscape. It was fully dark when Thomas finally escorted Emma back to the millinery. The night air carried the scent of pine and wet earth, and stars glittered with exceptional clarity in the rain-washed sky. They walked slowly, neither eager for the evening to end. At the shop door, Thomas turned to face Emma, his expression serious once more. "I want to do this properly," he said. "No rushing, no pressure. You've had enough upheaval in your life recently." Emma smiled, touched by his consideration. "I appreciate that. But Thomas..." "Yes?" "Sometimes life's upheavals lead us exactly where we're meant to be." She rose on tiptoe and pressed a soft, brief kiss to his cheek. "Good night." The wonder in his eyes as she stepped inside would warm her dreams that night and many thereafter. News of their courtship spread through Pine Ridge with predictable speed. By Sunday morning, when Thomas escorted Emma to church, the town's reaction was evident in knowing smiles and approving nods. Martha, of course, was thoroughly satisfied with this development, accepting congratulations as if she had personally arranged the match. "I knew from the moment he first saw you in that teal walking suit," she confided to Emma as they prepared the shop on Monday morning. "Thomas Bennett is a thoughtful man who considers decisions carefully, but once his mind is made up, he's resolute." Emma concentrated on arranging a display of summer bonnets, unwilling to admit how pleased she was by this assessment. "We're merely courting, Martha. It's not an engagement." "Yet," Martha replied with serene confidence. "But speaking of engagements, you should know that Nathaniel Porter announced his betrothal to Elizabeth Carson from Denver yesterday after services." Emma's hands stilled momentarily. Elizabeth Carson was the banker's niece, a slender, fashionable young woman who had visited Pine Ridge briefly in April. Emma had glimpsed her once, stepping from the stagecoach in an impeccable traveling ensemble that screamed Denver money and social position. "I see," she said carefully. "Well, I wish them happiness." Martha studied her sharply. "Does it bother you?" Emma considered the question honestly. "No," she said after a moment, mildly surprised to find it true. "It doesn't. Mr. Porter and I were clearly unsuited, though it took his rejection for me to recognize that fact. Miss Carson may be exactly what he's seeking." "And you've found what you weren't even looking for," Martha observed with satisfaction. "Life has a peculiar sense of justice sometimes." The following weeks brought a gentle rhythm to Emma's days. She continued working at the millinery, her reputation for skillful design growing steadily throughout Pine Ridge and the surrounding communities. Her embroidered trimmings became particularly sought after, with women traveling from as far as Silverton to commission her work. Thomas's courtship proceeded with the same thoughtful attention that characterized everything he did. There were no grand gestures or flashy displays, but rather a steady accumulation of meaningful moments. He brought her books he thought she'd enjoy, shared favorite vistas in the mountains surrounding Pine Ridge, and listened with genuine interest to her ideas and opinions. On warm evenings, they often sat on the small balcony outside Emma's apartment, watching twilight settle over the mountains while discussing everything from literature to local politics. Emma found herself increasingly drawn to Thomas's combination of practical intelligence and quiet depth. He wasn't a man who needed to dominate conversations or impress with his knowledge, but when he spoke, his observations were invariably thoughtful and often surprising. "What made you decide to stay in Pine Ridge?" Emma asked one evening as they shared slices of fresh apple pie. "You mentioned you originally came for just a 2-year contract." Thomas considered the question, his profile outlined against the sunset as he gazed toward the western peaks. "I think it was the honesty of the place," he said finally. "Eastern cities have their advantages, but there's often a layer of pretense there, people presenting themselves as something they're not, or aspiring to positions based on family connections rather than merit." He turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "Here, a man is judged by his actions, his word, his willingness to contribute to the community. I found that refreshing. When Sarah and I lost everything in the Philadelphia banking collapse of '79, we had to reassess what truly mattered. Pine Ridge offered a simpler but more authentic life." "You lost everything?" Emma hadn't heard this part of his story before. Thomas nodded. "My father's hardware business, our home, our savings, all gone in a single week when the bank failed. We were newlyweds with nothing but each other and whatever skills we possessed." A sad smile touched his lips. "Sarah was remarkable in that crisis. Never complained, never reproached me for investing our wedding gifts in the family business. She simply said, We'll begin again, Thomas, together. Emma reached for his hand, understanding now why he had responded to her own situation with such empathy. You know what it's like to have life upend your plans? Yes. His fingers, interlaced with hers, naturally, which is why I recognize the courage it took for you to stay in Pine Ridge after your own disappointment. Many would have retreated, licked their wounds elsewhere. You chose to build something new instead. I had help, Emma acknowledged. Martha, you, your friends who welcomed me, you all made it possible. We offered opportunities, Thomas corrected gently. You had the strength to seize them. His faith in her had become a cornerstone of Emma's growing confidence in Pine Ridge. Where Nathaniel Porter had seen only her physical appearance and found it wanting, Thomas saw the whole of her skills, her character, her resilience, and valued all of it. As spring yielded to summer, Emma's integration into Pine Ridge society deepened. She joined the Ladies' Aid Society, which supported families in need throughout the community. She taught a Sunday school class of young girls who delighted in her stories and simple sewing lessons. She even agreed to serve on the committee planning the town's Independence Day celebration, a signal honor for someone who had arrived less than 6 months earlier. Through it all, her relationship with Thomas continued to develop with the same steady reliability that characterized the man himself. They attended social events together, shared Sunday dinners with friends or with Thomas's employees and their families, and gradually built a partnership based on mutual respect and deepening affection. Emma was helping Alice Jenkins's daughter, Millie, select ribbons for her first proper hat when the bell above the shop door signaled a customer's arrival. Looking up, she was startled to see Nathaniel Porter standing awkwardly just inside the entrance, his usual self-assurance notably diminished. Mr. Porter, she greeted him professionally, giving Millie's shoulder a reassuring squeeze as the child shrank back slightly. How may we assist you today? Nathaniel cleared his throat. Good afternoon, Miss Wilson. I was hoping to speak with you privately for a moment, if that's convenient. Emma exchanged glances with Martha, who was watching the interaction with undisguised curiosity from behind the counter. I'm helping Miss Jenkins at present. Perhaps you could return in half an hour. Of course, he nodded stiffly. I'll wait outside. After he departed, Martha raised an eyebrow expressively. Well now, what do you suppose that's about? I have no idea, Emma replied honestly, returning her attention to Millie. Now, which ribbon do you prefer, the pink satin or the blue grosgrain? The selection process concluded with Millie proudly bearing a small paper parcel containing a length of blue ribbon, a birthday gift from her mother. After they left, Emma straightened the ribbon display, mentally preparing herself for whatever conversation Nathaniel Porter wished to have. Would you like me to stay within earshot? Martha offered, her expression protective. Emma smiled, touched by her friend's concern. Thank you, but I believe I can manage Mr. Porter on my own now. Nathaniel was waiting on the boardwalk outside, examining the toe of his polished boot with unusual intensity. He straightened when Emma appeared, his expression a mixture of discomfort and determination. Thank you for seeing me, he began formally. I won't take much of your time. How may I help you, Mr. Porter? Emma kept her tone neutral, neither warm nor cold. He glanced up and down the street, as if concerned about being overheard. I wanted to. That is, with my upcoming marriage, I felt it appropriate to. He paused, visibly collecting himself. I wish to apologize for my behavior upon your arrival in Pine Ridge. It was neither gentlemanly nor Christian. Of all the things Emma might have expected, this contrite admission wasn't among them. She studied Nathaniel's face, noting the genuine discomfort there. May I ask what prompts this apology now? Elizabeth, my fiancée, discovered the circumstances of your arrival through town gossip. A flush rose in Nathaniel's cheeks. She was. Displeased with my conduct, rightly so. She suggested that the honorable course would be to acknowledge my wrongdoing and seek your forgiveness before our wedding. Emma couldn't help but feel a flash of admiration for the unseen Elizabeth Carson, who apparently possessed both moral clarity and the confidence to demand better behavior from her betrothed. I see. Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably. I allowed superficial considerations to overshadow the qualities of character and capability that your letters had demonstrated. It was short-sighted and unkind. I am genuinely sorry, Miss Wilson. The apology, while clearly prompted by his fiancée, seemed sincere enough. Emma considered how to respond, aware that her words would likely be reported back to Elizabeth Carson. She felt no desire to prolong Nathaniel's discomfort or to nurture resentment that would serve no purpose in her new life. "Thank you for your apology, Mr. Porter," she said finally. "I accept it, and I wish you and Miss Carson every happiness in your marriage." Relief washed over Nathaniel's features. "You're very gracious, Miss Wilson. Elizabeth will be pleased to know we've cleared the air." He hesitated, then added awkwardly, "Bennett is a good man. The town speaks highly of your association." "Yes, he is," Emma agreed simply. "Good day, Mr. Porter." Watching him walk away toward his store, Emma felt a curious sense of closure. The man who had once wielded the power to devastate her with his rejection now seemed smaller somehow, less consequential in the grand scheme of her life. Whatever pain his actions had caused had led her to this moment, established in a community that valued her, pursuing work that fulfilled her, and building a relationship with a man who saw her true worth. As Emma turned to re-enter the millinery, she caught sight of Thomas emerging from the hardware store across the street. He spotted her immediately, raising his hand in greeting, his smile visible even at a distance. Emma returned the gesture, her heart lifting at the simple connection between them. This, she realized, was the difference between the future she had planned and the one she was discovering. She had come to Pine Ridge seeking security and finding instead the possibility of genuine happiness, a distinction as vast as the Colorado sky stretching endlessly above the mountains that had become her home. July arrived with blazing mountain sunshine and afternoon thunderstorms that transformed the hillsides into carpets of wildflowers. Pine Ridge bustled with preparations for the Independence Day celebration, the town's most important summer event. Committees organized everything from patriotic decorations to children's games, and Emma found herself in charge of creating bunting for the town square, a task that kept the millinery busy with red, white, and blue fabric well into the evenings. "You've certainly established yourself as indispensable," Martha observed as they worked late one night, stitching stars onto yet another length of bunting. The town council wouldn't have entrusted this project to just anyone. Emma smiled, securing a silver star with neat, invisible stitches. "I suspect Thomas's influence had something to do with my appointment." "Not at all," Martha contradicted firmly. "Thomas recused himself when your name was proposed precisely to avoid such an impression. Sheriff Cooper was your most vocal supporter, claiming anyone who could organize flood relief with your efficiency could certainly handle a few decorations." The revelation touched Emma deeply. She had worked hard to earn her place in Pine Ridge, and this tangible evidence of the community's acceptance meant more than Martha could know. "Well, they'll certainly have decorations," Emma said, gesturing to the piles of completed bunting ready for hanging. "I only hope it lives up to expectations." The 4th of July dawned clear and perfect, with deep blue skies and just enough breeze to keep the heat bearable. Emma rose early, donning a new dress she'd created especially for the occasion, white cotton with red piping and delicate blue embroidery around the collar and cuffs. Her hair was arranged in a becoming style that kept it off her neck in the summer heat while still looking festive. Thomas arrived to escort her to the celebration looking uncommonly formal in a linen suit and crisp white shirt, his hair neatly combed and his beard freshly trimmed. His eyes warmed appreciatively as he took in her appearance. "You look beautiful," he said, offering a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I brought you something for the occasion." Emma unwrapped the gift to find a brooch crafted of silver wire formed into an intricate star pattern with a tiny pearl at its center. "Thomas, it's exquisite. I commissioned it from Jacob Silver, the jeweler in Durango," Thomas explained, watching with pleasure as Emma pinned it to her collar. "I wanted something to commemorate your first Independence Day in Pine Ridge." The thoughtfulness of the gift, not flashy or expensive, but meaningful and perfectly suited to her taste, exemplified Thomas's approach to their courtship. He paid attention to the details that mattered to Emma, remembered her preferences, and consistently demonstrated his regard through actions rather than empty words. "It's perfect," she assured him, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm as they set out for the town square. "Thank you." The celebration exceeded all expectations. Pine Ridge's main square had been transformed with Emma's bunting stretching. Between buildings, tables laden with food contributed by every household, and a makeshift bandstand where local musicians played patriotic tunes. Children ran about with ribbons and small flags, while adults gathered in conversational groups, enjoying the rare opportunity for leisure and community. Emma's contribution was immediately apparent in the decorations that gave the humble mining town a festive air. Several women sought her out specifically to compliment her work and to inquire about commissioning similar decorative items for their homes. By midday, she had orders for embroidered cushion covers, table runners, and even curtain valances. Enough work to keep her busy through the autumn. "You've tapped into a need no one realized existed," Thomas observed as they shared a picnic lunch beneath a cottonwood tree at the edge of the square. "Bringing beauty to practical homes," Emma smiled, watching children participate in sack races across the grass. People often assume that because a place is remote or hard-working, its inhabitants don't appreciate beauty. But I find the opposite is true. Perhaps beauty matters more in rugged places precisely because it must be deliberately cultivated. Thomas's eyes held a tender expression as he regarded her. A wise observation, and particularly true of certain seamstresses who cultivate beauty wherever they go. The compliment brought warmth to Emma's cheeks. After months of courtship, Thomas still had the ability to surprise her with his perceptiveness and heartfelt words. Their relationship had deepened steadily, built on genuine compatibility and mutual respect rather than desperate need or convenience. The afternoon's festivities included speeches from town officials, readings from the Declaration of Independence, and various competitions that showcased local talents. Emma took particular pleasure in watching Thomas during the woodcutting contest, where his powerful shoulders and practiced skill with an axe earned him second place and good-natured ribbing from his friends. As dusk approached, anticipation built for the fireworks display, a rare luxury that the mine owners had funded as a gift to the community. Blankets were spread across the hillside above town for optimal viewing, families clustering together as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the eastern sky. Thomas spread a quilt for Emma in a somewhat secluded spot with an excellent view of both the designated fireworks area and the town below. The lights of Pine Ridge were beginning to twinkle on, creating their own earthbound constellation in the valley. "It's beautiful from up here," Emma observed, taking in the panorama. "Like looking down on a different world." Thomas settled beside her, close enough for comfort without impropriety. I often come up here when I need perspective. The challenges that loom large in daily life seem manageable when viewed from a distance. Emma nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. In Massachusetts, everything felt closed in. The buildings, the social expectations, the limited possibilities. Here there's a sense of expansiveness, as if a person might become anything. "Is that what you found in Pine Ridge?" Thomas asked quietly. The possibility to become something new. Emma considered the question thoughtfully. Not new exactly, more like more fully myself. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Thomas's hand found hers on the quilt, his touch warm and reassuring. You arrived as a complete person, with valuable skills and qualities. Pine Ridge has simply provided the space for those qualities to be recognized and appreciated. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, particularly by me. The first firework burst above them before Emma could respond. A brilliant red star that expanded across the night sky, accompanied by gasps of delight from the watching crowd. More followed. In quick succession, silver cascades, golden showers, blue and green starbursts that briefly illuminated the faces turned upward in wonder. In the intermittent light, Emma studied Thomas's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the thoughtful set of his mouth, the genuine delight in his eyes as he watched the display. She was struck by how comfortable she felt in his presence, how their silences were as meaningful as their conversations, how his steady reliability had become the foundation upon which she was building her new life. When the final crescendo of fireworks illuminated the night in a spectacular finale, Thomas turned to find Emma watching him rather than the sky. Something in her expression made him catch his breath. "Emma." She reached up to touch his face, gently tracing the line of his beard with fingertips that trembled slightly. "I love you, Thomas Bennett," she said softly. "I think perhaps I have for some time now." Joy transformed his features as he covered her hand with his own. "I've loved you since I watched you comfort children during the flood," he admitted. "Maybe even before that, when you first walked into my hardware store asking about brackets." He leaned forward, his expression seeking permission. Emma closed the distance between them, and their lips met in a kiss that held all the tenderness and promise of their developing relationship. It was brief but meaningful, a threshold crossed with full awareness of its significance. When they parted, Thomas kept her hand in his. "I want to build a life with you, Emma," he said simply. "Not today or tomorrow, whenever you're ready, but I want you to know that's where my heart is leading." Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the honest emotion in his voice. There was no artifice here, no calculation or social maneuvering, just the sincere declaration of a good man's intentions. "My heart is leading the same way," she replied softly. They remained on the hillside long after the other townspeople had departed, talking quietly about their hopes and dreams while stars wheeled overhead. When Thomas finally escorted Emma back to the millinery, their steps were lighter, their future clearer than it had been just hours before. Martha noticed the change immediately when Emma entered the shop the following morning, her eyes narrowing speculatively as she took in her assistant's radiant expression. "Well," she said, setting aside her ledger, "you clearly had an illuminating evening, and I don't mean the fireworks." Emma laughed, unable to contain her happiness. "Is it that obvious?" "My dear, you're practically glowing." Martha crossed her arms, expectation clear in her stance. "I assume our town's most eligible bachelor has finally declared himself." "We've declared ourselves to each other," Emma corrected gently, hanging her hat on the peg by the door. "No formal engagement yet, but an understanding." Martha's face softened with genuine pleasure. "I couldn't be happier for you both. You complement each other beautifully, he with his practicality and you with your artistic vision." The bell above the door interrupted their conversation as Mrs. Harrington entered, her expression both excited and conspiratorial. "Emma, my dear, I've just heard the most interesting news from Rebecca Cooper, who had it directly from Sarah Jenkins, who overheard it at the general store." Emma exchanged an amused glance with Martha. Pine Ridge's informal information network operated with remarkable efficiency, if not always perfect accuracy. "And what news would that be, Mrs. Harrington?" Emma asked, already suspecting the answer. "That you and Thomas Bennett were seen in what can only be described as a romantic embrace during the fireworks." Mrs. Harrington's eyes sparkled with delighted interest. "Is it true? Are congratulations in order?" By midday, it seemed half the town had found reasons to visit the millinery, each caller more transparent than the last in their curiosity about Emma and Thomas's relationship status. Emma handled the attention with grace, neither confirming nor denying the rumors, but accepting good wishes with quiet dignity. Thomas appeared at lunchtime bearing a basket from the cafe and a rueful expression. "I've been congratulated 17 times since breakfast," he informed Emma, as they retreated to the small courtyard behind the shop for privacy. "Including by people I'm quite certain weren't anywhere near that hillside last night." Emma laughed, spreading a napkin over her lap, as Thomas unpacked sandwiches and slices of apple pie. "Mrs. Harrington arrived at the shop approximately 15 minutes after I did this morning, armed with detailed intelligence." "Are you bothered by the attention?" Thomas asked, his expression concerned. "Small towns can be overwhelming in their interest." Emma considered the question honestly. "Not bothered, exactly. It's actually rather touching that so many people seem invested in our happiness." She selected a sandwich, her expression turning more serious. "I'm only concerned that expectations might run ahead of reality. We haven't discussed timing or formal arrangements." Thomas nodded, understanding her caution. "I'd like to court you properly, without rushing. You've had enough upheaval in your life recently." He hesitated, then added, "That said, I'm not a particularly patient man when my mind is made up." The admission made Emma smile. "And is your mind made up, Mr. Bennett?" "Completely, Miss Wilson." His eyes held hers with warm certainty. "Has been for months, but I'll proceed at whatever pace suits you best." The simple declaration, delivered without pressure or demand, touched Emma deeply. Thomas's consideration for her comfort and readiness exemplified the respect that formed the foundation of their relationship. "I appreciate that," she said softly. "I do love you, Thomas, and I believe we would build a good life together. I just need time to be sure," he finished for her. "Of course you do. After what happened with Porter." "This has nothing to do with Nathaniel Porter," Emma interrupted firmly. "That chapter closed long ago." She reached across the small table to take Thomas's hand. "This is about us, about building something lasting on the right foundation. I want to be certain we're choosing each other for the right reasons, not just because circumstances brought us together." Thomas's expression cleared with understanding. "You're wise to insist on that certainty," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "Too many marriages begin with romance and end with regret because the participants never truly knew each other." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Though I must say, I believe I know you quite well, Emma Wilson. Your strength, your talent, your occasional stubbornness." "Stubbornness?" Emma protested, laughing despite herself. "The way you insist on rearranging my displays whenever you visit the hardware store," Thomas elaborated, his eyes twinkling. "The manner in which you convinced the entire town council to approve new gaslight fixtures despite the expense. Your absolute refusal to admit that my sourdough bread is superior to yours." "Because it isn't," Emma retorted, enjoying their banter. "Your crust is too thick." "See, stubborn." Thomas's expression grew more serious, though his eyes remained warm. but also principled, hard-working, and fiercely loyal to those you care about. I admire every bit of it." Emma felt herself blush under his frank admiration. "And I admire your integrity, your kindness, and your willingness to see beyond surface appearances to what truly matters." She smiled mischievously. "Though I could do without your insistence on organizing everything by size rather than frequency of use." "A logical system," Thomas defended himself, playing along with their game. "For a logical man," Emma conceded, "which I happen to love despite his organizational quirks." Their laughter mingled in the summer air, the easy companionship between them as nourishing as the food they shared. By the time Thomas returned to his store and Emma to her workroom, they had reached an understanding. Their courtship would continue at its current pace, with the acknowledgement that it was leading toward marriage when Emma felt ready to take that step. The summer unfolded with steady warmth, both in temperature and in the developing relationship between Emma and Thomas. They established comfortable routines: Sunday services followed by lunch with friends, Wednesday evening walks to Overlook Point to watch the sunset, Saturday mornings when Thomas helped Emma in her small garden behind the millinery. Their courtship was conducted in full view of the town, with the transparency that frontier communities both demanded and appreciated. Emma's business flourished alongside her personal happiness. Orders for her embroidered goods multiplied as word spread beyond Pine Ridge to neighboring communities. She hired Alice Jenkins part-time to help with basic stitching, allowing Emma to focus on the more intricate designs that had become her specialty. By August, Martha was discussing the possibility of expanding the shop into the vacant space next door, creating a dedicated area for Emma's decorative household items separate from the millinery proper. "You've outgrown being my assistant," Martha told her candidly one evening as they reviewed the month's receipts. "You've become a partner, in truth, and the business should reflect that reality." Emma looked up in surprise. "What are you suggesting?" "Their formal partnership," Martha replied, pushing a document across the counter. "I've had Mr. Thornton draw up the papers. Half ownership, Emma. Equal split of profits. Equal say in business decisions." Stunned, Emma picked up the legal document with trembling fingers. "Martha, this is... I don't know what to say. Your generosity has nothing to do with it," Martha interrupted briskly, though her eyes were kind. "This is sound business. Your work now accounts for nearly 60% of our revenue. I'd be a fool not to secure your commitment to the shop's future." Emma scanned the document, still processing the magnitude of what Martha was offering. "But you built this business from nothing. It's your life's work." "And will continue to be," Martha assured her. "But I'm not getting any younger, Emma. Looking ahead, I need to know the millinery will be in capable hands. Hands that understand not just the craft, but the business." She smiled wryly. "Besides, I've never had children of my own. Consider this my legacy." Deeply moved, Emma set down the partnership agreement and embraced the older woman impulsively. "I'll make you proud, Martha. I promise." "You already have," Martha replied, returning the embrace before stepping back with characteristic briskness. "Now, about the expansion. Thomas mentioned the Peterson family is vacating the space next door at the end of September. If we move quickly, we can secure the lease before anyone else expresses interest." The mention of Thomas reminded Emma that such a significant change in her professional status would impact her personal plans as well. As a shop assistant living in a small room above her workplace, marriage had seemed a logical next step whenever she felt emotionally ready. As a business partner with growing responsibilities and increasing income, she faced more complex considerations. That evening, Emma wrote a long entry in her journal, exploring her thoughts about the unexpected opportunity and its implications for her relationship with Thomas. She loved him. Of that she had no doubt, but she also loved the independent life she was building, the respect she had earned through her own talents and determination. How would marriage change that? Would Thomas expect her to set aside her business interests to focus on creating a home? Or would he support her continued partnership with Martha? These questions were still circling in her mind when Thomas arrived the following evening for their regular walk to Overlook Point. He noticed her preoccupation immediately, his brow furrowing with concern as they left the town behind and followed the winding path up the hillside. "You're unusually quiet tonight," he observed, helping her over a rocky section of trail. "Is something troubling you?" Emma hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject tactfully. "Not troubling exactly. Martha offered me a formal partnership in the business yesterday." "Emma, that's wonderful news!" Thomas's genuine pleasure in her achievement warmed her heart. "Though not surprising, your contribution to the shop has been significant." "She wants to expand into the space next door," Emma continued, watching his reaction carefully. "Create a separate department for household linens and decorative items." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "The Peterson place. It's a good location, and the timing works well with their move to Denver." He glanced at her, his expression curious. "But you don't seem as excited as I would expect. Are you uncertain about the partnership?" They had reached the summit of the hill, a flat clearing that offered panoramic views of Pine Ridge below and the surrounding mountains. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the valley, gilding the town's simple buildings with warm light. Emma moved to the edge of the clearing, gathering her thoughts as she gazed down at the community that had become her home. "The partnership itself is everything I could hope for professionally," she said finally. "It's the implications for other aspects of my life that I'm trying to reconcile." Understanding dawned in Thomas's eyes. "For us, you mean?" Emma nodded, turning to face him directly. "Thomas, I love you. I see my future with you. But this partnership would mean significant responsibilities, a financial investment, long hours." She took a deep breath. "I need to know how you feel about that. About a wife whose work might sometimes compete with her domestic duties." For a moment, Thomas simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, to Emma's surprise, he began to laugh, not mockingly, but with genuine amusement tinged with affection. "Oh, Emma," he said, taking her hands in his, "did you truly think I would expect you to abandon your work? That I would want a wife whose only occupation was managing my household?" Put that way, her concerns did seem somewhat unfounded. "Well, it's the traditional expectation," she defended herself. "Many men—" "I'm not many men," Thomas interrupted gently, "and you're not many women. One of the qualities I love most about you is your talent and dedication to your craft." His expression grew more serious. "When Sarah died, I learned a painful lesson about life's uncertainty. I swore then that if I ever found love again, I would encourage my wife to develop her own skills and interests, to be a whole person apart from her relationship with me." His thumbs traced soothing circles on her palms. "Your work brings you joy and fulfillment. Why would I ever want to diminish that?" Relief and gratitude washed over Emma in equal measure. "So you wouldn't mind if I accepted the partnership? If I committed to expanding the business?" "Mind?" Thomas shook his head, his expression warmly earnest. "I'm proud of you, Emma. Proud of what you've built here. Proud of the respect you've earned through your own abilities." He smiled, a hint of mischief entering his eyes. "Besides, there are practical advantages to marrying a successful businesswoman. The hardware store could use some of your organizational talents." Emma laughed, the tension she'd been carrying dissolving in the face of his unhesitating support. "Are you proposing a merger, Mr. Bennett?" "Eventually, perhaps," he replied, his expression softening as he drew her closer. "For now, I'm simply telling the woman I love that her success is my joy." her fulfillment, my satisfaction. He released one of her hands to touch her cheek gently. Accept the partnership, Emma. Build something remarkable. Know that when you're ready for marriage, you'll find a husband who values your work as much as he values having you at his side. The setting sun cast them both in golden light as Emma rose on tiptoe to kiss him, her heart full of gratitude for this man who continued to surprise her with his generosity of spirit. In his arms, with Pine Ridge spread below them and the vast Colorado sky arching overhead, she felt the final pieces of her new life settling into place, not as separate elements of work and love, but as complementary facets of a future richer than she had ever dared to imagine. The autumn equinox brought crisp mornings and aspen trees turning to gold on the mountainside surrounding Pine Ridge. Emma marked 6 months since her arrival in Colorado, half a year that had transformed her from a rejected mail-order bride into a respected businesswoman with a thriving enterprise and a promising future. The expanded millinery and household goods shop opened to great fanfare on October 1st. The space next door had been connected to the original shop by widening a doorway between them, creating a larger, more diverse establishment that drew customers from throughout the region. Emma's embroidered linens occupied pride of place in the new section, alongside decorative cushions, table runners and curtain panels that brought Eastern refinement to frontier homes. "You've created something extraordinary here," Thomas observed, as he helped Emma arrange a final display of embroidered napkins on the eve of the grand opening. A genuine contribution to Pine Ridge's development. Emma smiled, adjusting a stack of delicately stitched handkerchiefs. "We have, yes, Martha's vision and my needlework, a fortunate combination. And courage," Thomas added quietly. "Don't forget that element. The courage to stay when leaving would have been easier. The courage to build something new from disappointment." His words touched Emma deeply. Looking around at the shop that now bore a new sign, Jenkins and Wilson Fine Millinery and Household Goods, she felt a surge of pride in what she had accomplished. Not merely surviving rejection, but thriving beyond it. Creating beauty where there had been emptiness, finding strength she hadn't known she possessed. "I've been thinking," Thomas said, his tone deliberately casual as he straightened a display of ribbons. "The apartment above the hardware store has been sitting empty since my assistant manager moved to his own place. It would make an excellent workroom for your embroidery projects. Good light, plenty of space, much more comfortable than that cramped room you're using now." Emma looked at him suspiciously. "Are you attempting to lure me closer to the hardware store, Mr. Bennett?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Perhaps, or perhaps I'm merely suggesting that a business partner deserves appropriate workspace." His expression grew more serious. "The apartment has a separate entrance. It would be entirely proper and entirely convenient for a certain hardware store owner," Emma teased, though the idea held undeniable appeal. Her current quarters had indeed become cramped as her business expanded. "I won't deny I'd enjoy having you closer," Thomas admitted, "but the offer stands on its practical merits alone. The space is available, it's suitable for your needs, and the rent would be reasonable." Emma considered the proposal, recognizing it for what it was, another demonstration of Thomas's support for her professional development, offered without pressure or ulterior motive. "I'll think about it," she promised, touched by his thoughtfulness. The grand opening exceeded all expectations. It seemed every woman in Pine Ridge and many from surrounding communities crowded into the expanded shop, exclaiming over the elegant merchandise and placing orders that would keep Emma and Alice busy well into the winter months. By closing time, Martha's ledger showed record sales and a list of custom commissions that would ensure prosperity through the traditionally slower winter season. A triumph. Martha declared as they locked the shop that evening. "You've transformed. This business, Emma. I couldn't be prouder if you were my own daughter." Exhausted but exhilarated, Emma climbed the stairs to her small apartment, her mind already filling with designs for the custom orders they'd received. As she lit the lamp, her gaze fell on the journal she'd kept since leaving Massachusetts, a chronicle of her journey from hopeful bride to independent woman. On impulse, she opened it to the first entry, written on the train as she traveled west to meet Nathaniel Porter. "I carry hope with me like a talisman," she had written. "Hope for a new beginning, for partnership, for a place where I truly belong." Those hopes had been fulfilled, though in ways she could never have anticipated. The rejection that had seemed so devastating had actually been the first step toward a life far richer than the one she'd originally sought. In Pine Ridge, Emma had found not just a husband, but a community. Not just security, but purpose. Not just acceptance, but genuine admiration for her talents and character. A soft knock at her door interrupted these reflections. Opening it, she found Thomas standing there, a small package in his hands and an uncharacteristic nervousness in his posture. "I apologize for the late hour," he said, "but I wanted to give you this, to commemorate your success today." Emma invited him in. Curious about both the gift and his apparent anxiety, Thomas remained standing just inside the door, clearly mindful of propriety despite their established relationship. "Open it," he encouraged, handing her the package. Inside was a carved wooden box of exquisite craftsmanship, its lid inlaid with different woods to create a pattern of mountains beneath a star-filled sky. Emma ran her fingers over the smooth surface, admiring the artistry. "It's beautiful, Thomas. Did you make this?" He nodded, a hint of color rising in his cheeks. "I've been working on it evenings, for your embroidery threads and needles." He gestured toward the box. "There's a hidden compartment in the base." Emma examined the box more closely, discovering a small drawer built into the bottom that slid out smoothly on well-crafted runners. "Clever. This will be perfect for—" Her words stopped abruptly as she saw what lay in the hidden drawer. A ring, simple but elegant, a band of gold holding a single pearl that caught the lamplight with subtle luster. "I know we agreed to proceed at your pace," Thomas said quietly, "and I'll honor that agreement. But I wanted you to have this, not as pressure, but as promise." He took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "When you're ready, whether that's tomorrow or a year from now, I'll be waiting." Emma lifted the ring from its hiding place, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. The pearl matched the one in the star brooch Thomas had given her for Independence Day, a deliberate connection between then and now, between their beginning and their future. "The traditional approach would be for me to hold on to that until you decide," Thomas continued, his voice gentle. "But I wanted you to have it now, to keep as a reminder that my commitment to you is unwavering, regardless of timing." The gesture was so perfectly suited to their relationship, respectful of her independence while affirming his devotion, that Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. This was what she had hoped for, but never quite believed she would find. A partnership between equals built on genuine admiration and support. "It's perfect," she whispered, looking up at the man who had seen her value when she most needed to be truly seen. "You're perfect." "Hardly that," Thomas demurred with a small smile. "Just a man who recognizes extraordinary quality when he finds it." Emma closed the ring in her palm, feeling its solid reality against her skin. "I won't need a year," she said softly, "or even many months. But I would like to get through the winter season at the shop, establish our new business properly." She met his gaze directly. Would spring be too long to wait? The joy that transformed Thomas's face was answer enough, but he put it into words regardless. "I would wait a lifetime for you, Emma Wilson. Spring will arrive before we know it." As he departed a few minutes later, leaving her with the carved box and the promise it contained, Emma felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with securing a husband and everything to do with choosing a future aligned with her deepest values. She had come to Pine Ridge seeking security and found instead the courage to create her own. She had sought acceptance and discovered the power of self-respect. She had expected to conform to someone else's expectations and learned instead to honor her own gifts. Standing at her window, watching Thomas's figure move down the moonlit street toward his own home, Emma felt gratitude fill her heart, not just for the man who loved her, but for the journey that had brought her to this moment, even for Nathaniel Porter's rejection, which had forced her to find strength she hadn't known she possessed. The mountains surrounding Pine Ridge stood as silent witnesses to her transformation, their ancient presence a reminder that some journeys, though difficult, lead precisely where they should. Emma touched the ring in her pocket, its presence a tangible promise of the future she was choosing, one built on genuine partnership, mutual respect, and love that valued substance over appearance. Spring would come, and with it, a new chapter. In a story that had begun with heartbreak, but would continue with joy, a story of a woman who had traveled west seeking one life and found another, far richer one waiting where she least expected it. Winter in the Colorado mountains brought snow that transformed Pine Ridge into a glittering wonderland. The streets lay hushed beneath white blankets, smoke curled from chimneys into crystal-clear air, and townspeople gathered around hearths to share warmth and stories during the long evenings. For Emma, it became a season of preparation, not just for the spring wedding she and Thomas had agreed upon, but for the merging of two lives built on separate foundations. The ring Thomas had given her remained in its wooden box most days, though Emma often took it out in private moments, letting its promise warm her heart. She had asked for time not from uncertainty about Thomas, but from commitment to the partnership she'd established with Martha. The winter season brought their busiest custom orders as people prepared holiday gifts and indoor comforts for the cold months ahead. "You could wear it publicly, you know," Martha observed one snowy afternoon as she caught Emma slipping the ring back into her pocket after a quiet moment alone. "The town already considers you practically married." Emma smiled, returning to the embroidered table runner she was completing for Mrs. Harrington's Christmas gift. "I know, but there's something special about this time, being certain of our future, but still independent in our present." Her needle flashed in the lamplight, creating delicate pine boughs along the runner's edge. "Besides, Thomas understands. He says, anticipation sweetens the eventual joy." Christmas transformed Pine Ridge with evergreen garlands, red ribbons, and candle-lit windows. The Jenkins and Wilson shop did record business, with Emma's embroidered handkerchiefs and table linens becoming the most sought-after gifts in town. Thomas, too, found the hardware store unusually busy as men purchased practical items for their households or tools for creating handmade presents. They celebrated Christmas Eve together at Thomas's home, a warm, solidly built house at the edge of town that reflected its owner's practical nature and quiet appreciation for quality. Emma had helped him decorate a small pine tree with paper stars, dried orange slices, and a few treasured glass ornaments that had belonged to his mother. "Next Christmas, this will be our home," Thomas said as they sat before the fire after a simple but delicious supper he had prepared. "Our tree, our traditions." Emma gazed around the comfortable room, already able to envision how her feminine touches would complement Thomas's sturdy, masculine furnishings. "It already feels like home when I'm here with you." Thomas took her hand, his expression growing serious. "I've been thinking about something you said months ago, about wanting to be sure we're choosing each other for the right reasons." He met her eyes directly. "I want you to know that I choose you, Emma Wilson, not out of loneliness or convenience." or social expectation, but because your strength, talent, and character make my life immeasurably richer." Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the simple sincerity of his declaration. "And I choose you, Thomas Bennet, not for security or position, but because your kindness, integrity, and steady heart have shown me what true partnership can be." Their kiss beside the Christmas tree held the sweetness of absolute certainty, a gift more precious than any wrapped package beneath its branches. January brought deep snow and temperatures that kept most townspeople close to home. Emma used the quieter business days to design her wedding dress, a creation of ivory silk with subtle embroidery that would reflect her personal style while honoring tradition. Martha insisted on ordering the fabric from Denver at her own expense, declaring it her wedding gift. "Nothing but the finest for this occasion," she declared as they pored over samples. "Pine Ridge hasn't seen a wedding this significant in years." February brought the first hints of winter's recession. Longer days, occasional thaws, the return of birds that had fled south during the coldest months. Emma and Thomas finalized their wedding plans, setting the date for April 10th, when spring blooms would be emerging and mountain passes would be clear enough for Thomas's sister and her family to travel from Denver. As the appointed day drew nearer, Emma divided her time between the shop and preparations for merging her household with Thomas's. The apartment above the hardware store had indeed become her workroom during the winter months, gradually accumulating her books, sewing supplies, and personal treasures, until the transition to living in Thomas's home seemed a natural conclusion to the process already underway. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of early wildflowers from the mountainsides. Emma dressed in her workroom with Martha's assistance, the ivory silk settling around her like a benediction. "You look radiant," Martha said, securing the final button at Emma's wrist, every inch the successful businesswoman and beloved bride. The ceremony took place in the Pine Ridge Community Church, filled to capacity with townspeople who had witnessed Emma's journey from rejected stranger to respected citizen. As she walked down the aisle alone, a declaration of independence before choosing partnership, Emma caught glimpses of familiar faces. Alice Jenkins and her children, Sheriff Cooper and his wife, Dr. Harrington, and Rebecca, widow Sullivan from the library. Even Nathaniel Porter was present with his new wife Elizabeth, their presence a reminder of how profoundly life could change course when hopes were dashed only to be rebuilt on firmer foundations. Thomas waited at the altar, his expression transforming with wonder as Emma approached. She carried no borrowed finery, wore no elaborate veil, just a simple wreath of early mountain blooms and the quiet confidence of a woman who knew her own worth. Their vows were straightforward but deeply felt, promises of partnership and support exchanged before a community that had become family. But there's something special about this time, being certain of our future but still independent in our present. Her needle flashed in the lamplight, creating delicate pine boughs along the runner's edge. Besides, Thomas understands. He says, anticipation sweetens the eventual joy. Christmas transformed Pine Ridge with evergreen garlands, red ribbons, and candlelit windows. The Jenkins and Wilson shop did record business, with Emma's embroidered handkerchiefs and table linens becoming the most sought-after gifts in town. Thomas, too, found the hardware store unusually busy, as men purchased practical items for their households or tools for creating handmade presents. They celebrated Christmas Eve together at Thomas's home, a warm, solidly built house at the edge of town that reflected its owner's practical nature and quiet appreciation for quality. Emma had helped him decorate a small pine tree with paper stars, dried orange slices, and a few treasured glass ornaments that had belonged to his mother. "Next Christmas, this will be our home," Thomas said as they sat before the fire after a simple but delicious supper he had prepared. Our tree, our traditions. Emma gazed around the comfortable room, already able to envision how her feminine touches would complement Thomas's sturdy, masculine furnishings. It already feels like home when I'm here with you. Thomas took her hand, his expression growing serious. I've been thinking about something you said months ago, about wanting to be sure we're choosing each other for the right reasons. He met her eyes directly. I want you to know that I choose you, Emma Wilson, not out of loneliness or convenience or social expectation, but because your strength, talent, and character make my life immeasurably richer. Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the simple sincerity of his declaration. And I choose you, Thomas Bennett, not for security or position, but because your kindness, integrity, and steady heart have shown me what true partnership can be. Their kiss beside the Christmas tree held the sweetness of absolute certainty, a gift more precious than any wrapped package beneath its branches. January brought deep snow and temperatures that kept most townspeople close to home. Emma used the quieter business days to design her wedding dress, a creation of ivory silk with subtle embroidery that would reflect her personal style while honoring tradition. Martha insisted on ordering the fabric from Denver at her own expense, declaring it her wedding gift. Nothing but the finest for this occasion, she declared as they pored over samples. Pine Ridge hasn't seen a wedding this significant in years. February brought the first hints of winter's recession, longer days, occasional thaws, the return of birds that had fled south during the coldest months. Emma and Thomas finalized their wedding plans, setting the date for April 10th, when spring blooms would be emerging and mountain passes would be clear enough for Thomas's sister and her family to travel from Denver. As the appointed day drew nearer, Emma divided her time between the shop and preparations for merging her household with Thomas's. The apartment above the hardware store had indeed become her workroom during the winter months, gradually accumulating her books, sewing supplies, and personal treasures until the transition to living in Thomas's home seemed a natural conclusion to the process already underway. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of early wildflowers from the mountainsides. Emma dressed in her workroom with Martha's assistance, the ivory silk settling around her like a benediction. You look radiant, Martha said, securing the final button at Emma's wrist, every inch the successful businesswoman and beloved bride. The ceremony took place in the Pine Ridge Community Church, filled to capacity with townspeople who had witnessed Emma's journey from rejected stranger to respected citizen. As she walked down the aisle alone, a declaration of independence before choosing partnership, Emma caught glimpses of familiar faces. Alice Jenkins and her children, Sheriff Cooper, and his wife, Dr. Harrington, and Rebecca, widow Sullivan from the library. Even Nathaniel Porter was present with his new wife Elizabeth, their presence a reminder of how profoundly life could change course when hopes were dashed only to be rebuilt on firmer foundations. Thomas waited at the altar, his expression transforming, with wonder as Emma approached. She carried no borrowed finery, wore no elaborate veil, just a simple wreath of early mountain blooms and the quiet confidence of a woman who knew her own worth. Just a simple wreath of early mountain blooms and the quiet confidence of a woman who knew her own worth. Their vows were straightforward but deeply felt, promises of partnership and support, exchanged before a community that had become family. When Thomas slipped the pearl ring from its hiding place onto Emma's finger at last, the gesture symbolized not possession, but completion, the final thread in a tapestry they had woven together through months of mutual respect and growing love. The celebration afterward filled the town square with music, laughter, and tables laden with food, contributed by every household in Pine Ridge. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, and Emma and Thomas shared their first dance as husband and wife, beneath a canopy of stars. Happy, Thomas asked softly as they moved together to the music of a local fiddler. Emma smiled up at the man who had seen beyond appearances to the woman beneath. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied, her ESRT full of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment, a journey that began with rejection but led to authentic love. And that, dear friends, is how a mail-order bride who was deemed too fat found her way to true happiness, not by changing herself to meet someone else's expectations, but by building a life worthy of her talents and finding love with a man who valued substance over appearance, character over convention, and the beauty of a soul over the dimensions of a body. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these. Up, just click and check them out.